right, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. And Emily, if we can, let's grab clip number 13, 12 and 13. Now let's just grab clip 13, the Michael Steele clip, and let's have that one ready to go. I got a piece from National Review Online talking about the George Zimmerman trial. Do you know that during the George Zimmerman trial, and you probably heard nothing about this, during the George Zimmerman trial, lasted about a month of time from jury selection on June 10, verdict announced on July 12. In the city of Chicago, there were 61 murders in that 1 month. 2 a day in Chicago, almost 2 a day. Of those 61 murders, 52 of the victims were black. Now, the perpetrators in most cases were also black. Blacks are the primary victims of homicide in America, and in 94% of the cases, the perpetrator is black. That's one of the reasons why we want beefed up patrols. We want a stronger police presence in minority communities, minority neighborhoods. Why do we do that? It's not an expression of racism. We want to protect innocent black lives. That's where the crime is occurring. That's where the perpetrators are found. That's where the innocent victims are found. 94% of black victims of homicide are victims of black violence, black on black. We want to stop that because we care about black lives as much as we care about white lives. Now, you got people out there saying, oh, that's racism. You're beefing up the police patrol in these minority neighborhoods. That's racism. That's exactly the opposite. That's how we're telling the black community, we value your lives. We value the peace and the tranquility in your neighborhood. If this is where the crime is occurring, this is where we want law enforcement to be, to protect you, to protect your life, and to protect your family. So 61 murders in Chicago, 52 of them, 52 of the victims were black, 43 were black males, and 7 were children under the age of 18. 7 victims, black, under the age of 18 in Chicago while the Zimmerman trial was going on, and you never heard a word of that in the media. Now, Eric Holder and others have made a big deal out of the Stand Your Ground law. 888, by the way, number 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And the plurality of Americans, by the way, agree with the Zimmerman verdict. Scott Rasmussen did a poll. 48 to 34% Americans agree with the verdict. 48% agree with the verdict. Only 34% disagree with it, so they believe that justice was done. Now, Eric Holder's gone after the Stand Your Ground law. Didn't say anything about filing federal charges against George Zimmerman, and I think it's because he knows he'd get laughed out of court. I mean, he would try. Nothing would stop him from trying other than the possibility of public embarrassment and humiliation. They simply have no civil rights case here against George Zimmerman, and I think even he is finally able to understand that. That's why he didn't talk about going after George Zimmerman in his speech to the NAACP. He talked about going after the Stand Your Ground law. Now, here's the problem in Florida. You know who the primary beneficiaries of the Stand Your Ground law in Florida are? They are blacks. Blacks are the primary beneficiaries of the law that Eric Holder wants to dismantle. This is a piece by Patrick Howley in the Daily Caller. African Americans benefit from Florida's Stand Your Ground self-defense law at a rate far out of proportion to their presence in the state's population. So Eric Holder's out saying that for the sake of blacks, we've got to get rid of the Stand Your Ground law. And Patrick Howley is saying, look, this is something that benefits blacks. They will be harmed. They will have one less means of self-defense if this law is repealed. Black Floridians, according to Howley, have made about a third of the state's total Stand Your Ground claims in homicide cases, a rate that is nearly double the black percentage of Florida's population. The majority of those claims have been successful, a success rate that exceeds that for Florida's whites. You've even got Stevie Wonder out there. I'm never going to sing a note in the state of Florida until they get rid of Stand Your Ground, even though Stand Your Ground had absolutely nothing to do with the Zimmerman trial. Nobody ever invoked it. The prosecution didn't invoke it. The defense didn't invoke it. The judge didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about stand your ground one single solitary time. But all of a sudden, everything has become about this stand your ground law. But Howley points out approximately 1/3 of Florida's stand your ground claims in fatal cases have been made by black defendants, and they have used the defense successfully 55% of the time. African Americans used stand your ground defenses at nearly twice the rate of their presence in the Florida population, which was listed at 16.6% in 2012. But a third of the claims were filed, the stand your ground claims as a means of defense, as a form of defense, filed by blacks. So in other words, blacks are the primary beneficiaries of the stand your ground law, and Eric Holder and Stevie Wonder, apparently they're racists. Apparently they have a racial animosity against the black race. They want to remove legal protection from the black race. 888-589-8840 is the number to call, free for all Thursday. We'll talk about just about anything that's on your mind. Let's grab a couple of phone calls. Let's go to Elizabeth in Texas. Elizabeth, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Yes. Zimmerman said he was following Trayvon when he was told, I don't need you to do that. He was
no, he actually was not. He was not following Trayvon Martin.
Yes.
No, he wasn't. Now, Elizabeth, you got to get the facts straight here. Here's what happened. He sees Trayvon Martin. He's dressed suspiciously. He's acting suspiciously. They've had 8 or 9 break-ins, burglaries in that neighborhood. That's why they got somebody out there representing the neighborhood watch. So he sees somebody that's acting and dressed suspiciously. So he calls 911. We need to have somebody come here because I think we've got somebody that is up to no good. And the dispatcher says, where do we come? Where are you? And George Zimmerman says, I'll get an address for you to give you some idea where to come. The dispatcher says, we don't need you following him. George Zimmerman says, fine, I won't follow him. I will just see if I can get an address so when the police show up, they know where to come. So he goes, not looking for Trayvon Martin, looking for an address so the police know where to show up when they come into the neighborhood. Then he's walking back to his car, and he gets jumped by Trayvon Martin. He was not following him. In fact, it was Trayvon Martin that was following George Zimmerman. That's why he jumped him.
Didn't Zimmerman say, when the police said, are you following him? He said, yep. Didn't he say that?
No, Trayvon Martin jumped him. Trayvon Martin is the one that accosted him.
No, what I'm saying, didn't the 911 said, when the police asked Zimmerman, are you following him? He said, yep. And he said, well, we don't need you to do that.
And so he stopped doing it.
Oh, okay. No, but he said he continued because he wanted to see the street name.
Right. He wasn't following Trayvon Martin. He was trying to get an address for the police. Sure, he was following him. That was his job, neighborhood watch. No, this guy's acting suspiciously. I need to see if he's up to no good. So sure, he's going to follow him. Then he calls in because he has reason to think that this is something that may need police attention. He's not going to deal with it himself. That's why he calls 911, Elizabeth. He says, I'm not going to deal with it myself. That's not my job. That's the job of the police. So I'm going to call them. I think I've got reason to think this is something that needs to be a matter of police business. So I'm going to call it in. Instead of dealing with it myself, I'm going to call it in. That's what he did. We don't need you following him. George Zimmerman says, fine, I'm not going to follow him. I'm just going to look for an address.
Why do people even bother to call in if you won't give me a chance to speak? You know, he was following him because...
Elizabeth, okay. Elizabeth, we're just going to have to disagree about that, okay? You say he was following him. I say he wasn't. What else do you have to offer?
He was following him. He said, yep, yep. He said, are you following him? He said, yep. The voice said, we don't need you to do that.
Right, Elizabeth, and so he stopped. The police said, we don't need you following him, so he didn't.
He continued because he wanted to see the street name.
Right, we agree on that. Okay. You and I, Elizabeth, you and I agree about that. He was looking for a street address. He wasn't following Trayvon Martin, so we agree on that.
Okay, so he continued in the same direction until Rachel said that somehow Zimmerman appeared behind Trayvon, and Trayvon said, "Why are you following me? Why didn't Zimmerman identify himself at that time?" And when Rachel said, "Get off of me," maybe Zimmerman tried to hold on to him. And so Trayvon punched him in his nose. Think about it. When somebody is following me and I think somebody is following me, I am not going to lead them to my house.
Well, let me ask you this, Elizabeth. You're saying that George Zimmerman punched Trayvon Martin in the face?
No, I didn't say that. I said maybe George Zimmerman held on to him.
Maybe, but you don't have any evidence for that.
None of us have any evidence.
Oh, yeah, we do. We've got bruised knuckles on Trayvon Martin's fists, indicating he was hitting somebody or something. We've got pictures of George Zimmerman with a broken nose, blood on his face. We have pictures of George Zimmerman with lacerations in the back of his head like somebody was beating his head against the pavement, which is exactly his story. So we do have evidence.
No, if when they met up, if Zimmerman tried to hold on to Trayvon, why did Trayvon say, "Get off of me"?
Well, how do you know it was Trayvon Martin who was saying, "Get off of me"?
Rachel heard it on the phone. She heard it to say Trayvon.
No. That phone conversation, Elizabeth, that phone conversation terminated 4 minutes before the confrontation happened.
No. No.
All right, Elizabeth. Well, listen, I think we're just going to have some disagreements here, but I got about 30 seconds. So what's your takeaway here? What?
My takeaway is if this young man is walking home and he was profiled wrongly as up to no good.
So the bottom line, let me ask, so the bottom line is, do you think that George Zimmerman should have been convicted of murder?
Of course, because you know what, George Zimmerman is a adult, and he couldn't fend off Trayvon.
Do you know that Trayvon is actually taller than George Zimmerman and had done some martial arts fighting, which George Zimmerman was abysmal at? Did you know that?
Huh?
Did you know that Trayvon Martin was taller than George Zimmerman and had some martial arts fighting experience, which George Zimmerman did not have? Did you know that?
Zimmerman was in martial arts class doing boxing.
All right, got to let you go, Elizabeth. Out of time. Focal Point, AFR Talk.